you imagine a newspaper article? A newspaper article says, scientists in Cold Spring Harbor in New York State have cured cancer. Okay, so that's talking about some research, some very important research. It doesn't mention any articles. We would ignore it. We wouldn't pick that up. It would need to say in the journal Science or Cell or whatever, and to refer to like that single piece of research. We're doing article level stuff, not kind of research project level stuff. So what we're trying to do is be a data services company and collect all this data together, do different things with it, and then give it to users as kind of action, I guess. What I wanted to say up front, I think it's quite important to say about all metrics up front, is that you can actually split certainly what we do up into two bits. So one is the data collection and display of mentions of scholarly papers. So that's, you could imagine it like a common thread plus plus or something for a journal, right? Just, if you're an author or an editor or a reader, you go to a paper and it's a way of, well, ideally what you'd like to do is see what everyone is saying about that paper. What's the wider community saying about it? It turns out that people don't talk about papers on publisher sites, at least not historically, so with a few notable exceptions. A lot of big SDM publishers tried having common threads, and arguably they didn't do it properly. But Cell, Biomed Central, and Nature for a long time, we spent a lot of time investigating sort of common threads on papers, and people just don't do it for lots of different reasons that I won't necessarily go into here. But people are much more comfortable talking about papers in, apart from anything else, areas that they control. So if you're a blogger, for example, if you're going to talk about a paper, you're going to write about it on your blog, not on cell.com. So those two things are separate. It's not necessarily all about the numbers. And it's not that all of the value in metrics, despite the name having metrics in it, is all there is to it. There's already value in the qualitative side as well as the quantitative. And that's why, so in a way I feel a little bit like a fraud, I guess, because our metric, obviously I was mentioning it in a metric session, but actually I don't see that being the strongest value, certainly what we do and what a lot of the other groups do. At this point, I think Mike Taylor said it at a presentation at UKSG, I think it was anyway, that all metrics were it's kind of version 0.1. I think that's true of the metrics part. I think on the data collection and display side, I think there's already something there that people can find useful and can extract value from immediately. So this is repeating a little bit what we heard last time, but there is no good metric based on all metrics right now. Like if anyone thinks they have one, they're wrong, I think. They tend to be a bit more focused on the filtering side of things. So on discovering new articles, on measuring things like attention, which is different from impact. You get a lot of, because everyone has a different view of what impact means, so again, be lots of different metrics. But attention certainly isn't the same as scholarly impact in the traditional sense, where you're thinking, how much impact has it had on the community of my peers. What you can do with our metric, and you can substitute the other tools in there, is make authors happy, for example. Turns out, it's maybe not a great surprise, but if you're an author, you want to know what people are saying about your work. And it can be a tool to aid that qualitative assessment. So you might not put in a grant proposal, say, well, I wouldn't advise my articles be tweeted 20 times, but you could say, well, there's evidence here, there's an indicator that was picked up by, I don't know, these NGOs, or the Department for International Development, something like that. And I think one of the things that it's going to be better at doing right now, or rather that it can do right now, is help you find successes. So it can't necessarily rank everything and say this is good versus that, but it can maybe highlight areas where you have done really well and help you pull out independent evidence of that, something quantifiable to help showcase that. What I can't do, and we'll spend a lot of time on this slide, because we've already heard it, but it's certainly not a replacement for citation counts. It's a complement, kind of thing. It can be used to measure quality, something that's sophisticated to get out there. But it also can make people talk about articles. just because we're collecting all the data doesn't mean that people are necessarily going to be downloading them and talking about them to the degree necessary for us to make any informed decision about them, which might be useful. And that's what I'm going to talk about, sort of invite freedom. So just briefly, just to give you a bit of context, I'll talk about Altmetric again, and about how we sort of get the data out there. So our model is basically that we charge commercial publishers. So if you're a publisher, we would charge you to show the data we collect to your authors. If you're a librarian, you can get the data for free. If you're an institutional publisher, you can get the data for free. If you're a researcher, you can kind of get the data for free. You can basically rate it and do it on kind of partial article basis. But I encourage you to try it out if you're interested in this kind of stuff. And once you take a sample of the data, you don't need a key or anything to get started with the Altmetric API. You do further down the line to get some more information, but these links, for example, will work. First one will give you all of the articles that we picked up in the past day, sort of mentioned in the past day, from the data sources that I'll talk about in a bit. And the second one will show you everything from the past 3 days with the UI prefix 10 MPG, that's the nature, or the MPG prefix. And what it does is give you the data to populate a page like this. So I talked about some of the sources, or I mentioned the sources we track, so that's things like Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, newspapers, magazines, Pinterest, blogs, basically as many as possible. We're not at the stage yet, I think, where people can say, these are the 3 sources you must track, and these are the ones that aren't being worth paying attention to. I think right now we're talking about just collecting the data and getting enough of the data together to be able to do the research to get to that point. I won't talk about that, but that's the publishing stuff. Obviously, once you do have the data set together, I mentioned that we do score by attention. And the reason we do that is for a slightly different type of impact, which is publisher oriented, and it's about the attention papers are getting, and it's if you publish a journal, you want to see how well is that sort of distribution aspect of my work going. How many am I reaching the right people? How am I doing versus my competitors? This kind of thing. So we built some tools that allow you to do that. Again, this stuff is free for librarians. If you go to the website, there's a form you can get a free account. Ditto the bookmark it. We'll talk a lot about it. If you go to the website, there's such a thing you can add to Chrome and Smart and things. If you go to an article, you press it, you'll get, it makes that API call in the background. So, the reason I gave you that context was I could talk about the reactions. So, we've been doing this for about a year, and effectively we've been taking this kind of Altmetrics data and putting it in front of end users, because publishers are taking it and we're citing it and we're seeing it. And we get a lot of feedback, obviously, from those end users and from the people who are getting either complaints from them or thanks. And where we get the best feedback is on that qualitative side from authors. So the whole, I didn't realize that my paper was being talked about in this area. Now I can go off and, maybe it's negative. It doesn't guarantee, just because your paper you mentioned doesn't mean that someone's saying, oh, that's awesome. It could be a great example of the Arsenic Life paper. The one in Science is, I think it's pretty much categorically disputed now, or debunked rather now. But I started off with Rosie Brightfield on her blog saying there's something wrong here, and kind of kicked off from there. And a lot of the attention around it after the initial kind of, oh wow, this is cool, was the backlash against it, and how they handled it, things like that. Another more recent example would be things like the embryonic stem cell paper that was Cell recently, where I think it was a mistaken figure, and someone on the top here, which is kind of one of these systems for leaving comments on papers. And they ended up, they didn't retract the paper, but they corrected enough to make sure that all the data was sound. So this is someone's talking about paper doesn't mean it's good. From readers, the positive reaction we get is more in the filtering stuff. So it's not that, at least we haven't seen evidence of people going, well, I went to this paper and I wouldn't have picked up on the fact that, it wasn't scientifically sound. unless there's a bug post there or something. It's more, we give a lot of data to apps, so to help you put in PubMed filters and then tell you what to read and this kind of thing. And from editors, the main reaction is, actually the initial reaction is almost, I could have told you what papers would get attention just by looking at the title. And actually most of the time it's true. Where it works, where our metric can help, I think, is filling that out. So you can be an editor, you know your subject area very well, you can look at the list of topics and you go, okay, well these 3 are going to be very popular. I can tell that the community really latch on them, exciting things. But they might miss 1 or 2. So kind of ones they're not necessarily thinking about, that it's sometimes useful to get you watching for them. So that took a little bit longer than I thought, but move straight into the data, which I think is interesting stuff. So one of the big questions behind our metric is, okay, we know that people are online, they're talking about papers, but how many of them are there? How much is enough? So these are some very high level. But so the caveat here is this is data that we've collected. We only collect data about articles that have a recognized scholarly identifier in the page metadata normally. We definitely miss things. So sometimes it's like a PDF. Someone links to a PDF. We have no way of going back from the PDF to a bibliographic record, basically, because it's not the right metadata in the PDF, or can't hack the URL, or we don't know the publisher, or whatever. So this isn't, a 100% complete set by any means, but I think it's pretty good. I think it's the best one out there for this kind of stuff. So we see about 14,000 distinct mentions of papers each day. That's not including Mendeley and Cytolite bookmark counts. This is actually someone explicitly sharing or discussing a paper. So they've written something, they've included a link to a paper. Well, most of the time, with one exception. And each week we see about 20,000 unique articles. That's going to be time. If you track a set of articles over time, so we did this for a big set of Biomed Central articles over the course of a year, and then you plot when the activity happened, and as you might expect, different sources kind of peak at different times. So, for example, this is generalizing across a large set of articles, but if you look at tweets, for example, by day 3 after publication, they've received 50% of the tweets they're ever going to get that year. By day 74, they've got 90% of the tweets they're ever going to get that year. So that's a very short window there. It's a kind of a newness thing. Immediately comes out, gets tweeted. This is in general, again, remember, there's always going to be exceptions to it. If you compare that to downloads, weirdly, downloads is much further along, that's day 107. That gets to 50%. So, already there's a bit of a disconnect there. Blogs, much the same, near the beginning, there's some, it's a wider set there, a wider range of time rather. And actually, Mendeley is listed. Mendeley was about 14,000.